Here we are. It's a beautiful evening here in London. I'm on St. James's Street, right at the corner of Jermyn Street, of course, in front of one of my favorite places, Davidoff of London. And I must say that I've had the distinct privilege of having been invited by Edward and Eddie Sahakian to enjoy a cigar with them after the shop closes. So I hope you'll join me. One of the things I'm hoping that we are able to tease out of them are a few of their stories of Cuba and the Dominican Republic. Gentlemen, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome here, Kirby. So nice to have you here.
Pleasure to welcome you, Kirby.
Edward, Eddie, thank you so much for having me. Of course, one of my great pleasures of traveling to London, of course, is seeing you too. And so it's so nice to be able to do this on the first night here in London.
The honor is ours. My father and I could not wait to see you as soon as we heard you were coming again.
Opportunity to smoke a cigar, not to be passed up. You know, one of my great dreams, of course, is to one day be able to go visit Cuba. You know, I've wanted to travel to Cuba for as long as I can remember, certainly for as long as I've been smoking cigars. And of course, you two, you know, I've had the opportunity to go many times. And so I thought, you know, maybe, Edward, you might share with us, you know, some of your memories from maybe one of your first trips.
With great pleasure, because that first trip I'll never forget.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dad.
Eddie.
May I, with that recollection in your mind, offer Kirby a little cigar to start the proper recollection?
I was just going to suggest that before I start. Yes, it might go on a bit, my long story.
Great company certainly is always even a little bit better with great cigars. So we've got some here. Now these are not Cubans, these are Davidoffs, right? And we've got three different cigars here, right? So I think it is a great illustration of just the breadth and the portfolio that Davidoff of London has developed.
Kirby, what you have there is the Davidoff Royal Robusto, as it befits you. You are a king from Texas.
Well, everyone feels like a king here in these chairs, so thank you.
You're very kind. It's a beautiful cigar. It has significant aged tobacco, approximately 10 years in there.
Really?
Smooth, delightful. It's got a real personality as you smoke through that. So I'd love to know what you think when you get through there.
And so the tobacco is aged for 10 years before it's rolled, or it's aged after it's rolled?
Before it's rolled.
Okay.
Only Davidoff seem to execute that as well as they do. And there's a real personality. They're able to continue rolling that year on year and preserving the same identity to the cigar.
It's like blending a good whiskey.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Dad, what are you smoking?
Well, I've chosen to smoke the Davidoff Year of the Tiger.
Of course.
I think it's very appropriate. We're in February. The Chinese New Year has started. It's the Year of the Tiger. And this year, Davidoff has done something magical. I don't know if you could see it very well. They managed to put the stripes of a tiger onto the wrapper of the cigar as well.
How on earth did they achieve that? Have they revealed the secrets yet?
I have heard one or two stories.
Okay.
But I gather the stem of the wrappers were separated and then put onto the wrappers, bunched them, then they were pressed for a number of days, I think no more than 2-3 days. And that way they managed to extract the oils of the stem onto the wrapper itself, and it's left these beautiful marks on it. It's just, this is a cigar tiger. So, and I only smoked one of these when it just arrived. And I thought it would be very appropriate. I smoked another one with my dear friend Kirby here.
Thank you. Well, happy Chinese New Year.
Happy Chinese New Year, yes.
Kirby, may I offer you the match, or would you like me to light it for you?
I can't refuse that offer. You know, of course, our How to Light a Cigar video, I think, is fastly approaching the 1 million view mark. Again, another great testament to the poetry with which you guys are able to really ritualize the enjoyment of lighting a cigar.
You're too kind. I can't do it as well as Dad, as you probably know. But after many years of practicing...
You've learned very well, Eddie.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think this really speaks to Davidoff. I mean, they are really, you know, singular in the world of cigars and their ability to flawlessly execute. Am I wrong?
They've come a long way in a short time.
Really?
First time I remember when I visited the Dominican Republic. It was with Dr. Schneider. He invited me to go there with him because he said, we've just purchased the factory and we're going to make the Davidoff cigars there. I'd like you to be one of the first people to see it.
Wow.
And when we walked into the factory, very basic, very primitive, but I could see his dream, what it's going to turn into, and it was a lovely experience.
And what a bold decision. I mean, you know, of course, all of the history of Cuban tobacco to, you know, to say, you know what, we're going to break away from rolling and manufacturing our cigars in Cuba and go do it in the Dominican Republic.
Well, that was a time when you spoke about cigars, it was Cuban cigars, Havanas, nothing else.
Yeah.
And Dr. Schneider said, Dr. Schneider, you will never be able to make a cigar as good as the Cuban was. I said, Edward, you wait and see. And he was right.
Wow.
He was right. He was absolutely right.
How long did that take? I mean, you know, I'd love to hear, you know, of course, your stories about Cuba, but I mean, this point right here of, you know, Davidoff, you know, transitioning from having their cigars made in Cuba to made in the Dominican Republic was huge.
Well, the move was made in 1990, and they officially stopped purchasing or Davidoff cigars being made in Cuba, and they moved on to the Dominican Republic. Before that, Dr. Schneider had made a research of the whole of the Caribbean, and his choice was Dominican Republic, and it was with a gentleman called Hendrik Kellner. He found him, they met, they talked, they tested some of the cigars he had made, and Dr. Schneider said, this is a man that I could work with. They shook hands, and it all started from there.
Yeah. Well, Klaas, his son, is a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of meeting, and
he was a little boy then.
Must have been a little
boy then, yes.
And so
I remember him.
Thank you. Wow. Brilliantly lit.
If you need a little further encouragement, my lighter awaits you.
May I just use that?
I dare not light your own cigar, Dad. I know I have not reached your mastery.
Well, you must get to work on your own then.
I will relieve you from that torture, Eddie.
It's
that
a pleasure.
virgin puff, as you described the last time we met, you know, really, I guess, had been something that I'd always rushed, is the, you know, the lighting of my cigar and robbing myself of this first, you know, puff of smoke. And I have to say, after having had the opportunity to experience that, I don't think I'll be able to rush that process ever again.
I'm so happy to hear that, Kirby. You know, it can be borderline annoying when you're impatient for that cigar, but it's worth the wait, isn't it?
Yeah, sure is. So that's incredible. So you were one of the first people that Dr. Schneider took to the Dominican Republic.
I could claim I was the first person outside the inner circle of the management to go there with Dr. Schneider. And it was a very interesting trip. We landed in Santo Domingo, long road trip up to San Diego, and it was very basic. The cigar industry in the Dominican Republic was not all that great at that time.
Yeah. And what about in the Dominican? I mean, did it exist at all? I mean, clearly they were growing tobacco.
Well, they were growing tobacco, they were making cigars, but it was not
Nothing
on the
reputable.
map of the cigars at all. They had some local brands. The only other people who had started a few months before that making cigars, it was the Dunhill, but they had chosen another factory.
In the Dominican?
In the Dominican Republic. And Davidoff was really, they started from scratch, literally. When we visited, they had one building which was partially the working rollers working there. They had the storage for the tobaccos, a few offices, a lot of land, and nothing much. And then Dr. Schneider said, this is going to be the rolling factory here on this side. There was nothing there. I said, well, it looks very nice. Well, it will look nice when it's done.
I mean, what
and
a
that's
visionary.
going to be the aging
Really.
section. That's going to be the manufacturing, quality control. And as he's pointing it out, we're looking at just plain land, nothing else. So he literally started from scratch. I remember one of the interesting things when it was the second or third day we were there, and Hanky Kellner, he needed to discuss some business with Dr. Schneider. So he said, I've asked my wife Imelda to take you around to show you the city. Is there anything you would like to see? I said, well, yes, I'd love to see some cigar shops. And he hesitated. He said, well, we don't have cigar shops here as such. I said, well, what do you mean you don't have cigar shops? You know, where do people buy their cigars from? So, well, we have shops selling cigarettes, but nobody really smokes cigars as such.
Wow.
There was not a single cigar shop I could go and visit.
It's amazing.
It was, I was surprised. I was so surprised.
Incredible. And how did that contrast with your first time to Cuba? I mean, because at this point, 1990, Davidoff of London had been open for
that
what,
was
10 years?
1992.
92, okay.
That was 92 when I did the first visit. Davidoff had left there in 1990. It took them a year and a half to find the location and start working on the plans. My first visit to Cuba was in end of 1987.
Really? Okay.
1987, one day I had a visit from a gentleman called Olmeida, Senor Olmeida. He was the Cuban, well, he was the representative of Cuba Tobacco. Then it was called Cuba Tobacco. Habanos, they don't exist. And one day he walked into the shop. We had met a few times before. And he said, Edward, I want to talk to you about something very serious. I said, oh God, what's happened? So I said, please come and sit down on these chairs.
Yeah,
And I said, what's happened? Have I said something upset you or what? He says, no, Edward, I want to ask you a favor. I said, yes, by all means. He said, if we invite you to come and visit Cuba, will you come? I said, Senor Almeida, I thought you will never ask. I'd love to come to Cuba. Of course, it's always been my dream to visit Cuba, where the cigars are made, where it's all done. I said, well, why do you ask that? He said, well, I was under the impression you might not want to visit. I said, no, well, whoever gave you that impression was wrong. I would love to visit.
Maybe it was mom, maybe she...
No, it wasn't.
I mean, what was it like traveling, to Cuba kind of in that era? I mean,
Well, I will tell you how it was.
travel commonplace?
Because
or-
after he spoke to me, he said, then I'm going to invite a few other retailers. And now that you're coming, I could tell them that Edward is coming, so they will come as well. And he invited, there was about 4 or 5 couples. I was there on my own, but it was Desmond Souter with his wife. There were 3 other couples, 1 or 2 from the north. James Barber was one of them. And everything was organized. It was in February. And we received our invitations, our itinerary. And the first thing I noticed, of course, was that we had to fly from London to Shannon in Ireland. And then from there, change the plane and fly a direct flight, well, not direct, with a flight with 1 stop to Havana. So we were all excited. We're going to go to Cuba, all dressed up in our very light clothing, Panama hats, the lot. And we got onto the plane, British Airways, beautiful, took us to Shannon Airport, got off. A couple of hours later, the flight is ready to board. We're checking our itinerary, and it was an Aeroflot. I'm talking about Aeroflots of the 1980s.
Okay.
And the other thing we noticed, there was no numbers on the tickets.
An Aeroflot.
No
A
seats.
float plane or?
Aeroflot, which
Aeroflot
was the
is
Russian
the Russian
airline.
airline. Okay.
The
Russian
state.
airline. That was the only airline flying to Cuba in those days.
Really?
So we all gathered in front of the gate to go onto the plane. Altogether, we were about 12 of us. And there was a lot of other passengers waiting. the gates opened. They announced, please board the plane. And we were being more polite, so anybody that wanted to push through, we let them go without realizing the reason. It's just because they knew what was going to happen. Everybody went and sat down in the plane. By the time we arrived into the airplane, there was one seat here, one seat there, one seat there. We could not stay together as a group.
So like EasyJet these days.
A bit like that, yes.
Southwest Airlines in the United States. It's free for all.
We all managed to get our seats. We sat down. The plane took off. And they said we have one stop for refueling in a place called Gander. Now, Gander is northeast of Maine, sort of.
In Canada?
Not too far from Canada, or it is part of Canada. I'm not sure if it's an island or.
Was it Newfoundland or somewhere? Or?
I don't know. All I remember, it was Gander, and it was only for refueling. And it was very cold. We landed there for refueling. They said you can go inside and have some refreshments. You're not allowed to stay on board. Mm-hmm. We're walking out of the plane, t-shirt, short, maybe a jacket, and the degree there was minus 20 degrees centigrade.
Wow.
It hit us. I mean, we nearly fainted.
Oh, gosh.
And is there a bus? Is there a car to take us? No, you have to walk from here to the building there, which is about 200 yards away. I don't know how fast we ran there. Just talking about it gives me the shivers still.
And no choice.
Got into the building. It was warm, so we weren't freezing inside. There was nothing available. They were waiting for the kettles to boil so they could offer us tea or coffee. And that's all we had, hot tea and coffee. And that took us about an hour and a half to wait until it was ready. Coming back, there was a couple, Ted Sissons, he was with us. He had a heart problem to start with. And when we went into the building, his heart palpitations started because of the cold. So they did arrange a small jeep to come and take him into the plane. The rest of us, we had to walk. Oh, I forgot to mention, walking in and out of the plane, there was no stairs going up. The back of the plane opened.
Wow. And
you just had to walk up there, a bit like the cattle trucks.
Yeah. My goodness.
It was incredible.
What a journey.
We flew there. We arrived in Havana. It was early afternoon. In the airplane, we were given sandwiches as food, and our dessert was a trolley walking by with oranges and apples. That's all it was. And the lady, she was pushing the trolley, and she was just throwing the apples and oranges, whatever she fancied, she would throw at you. And if you were not quick to catch it, the person sitting next to you would get it, and it was not yours anymore. Some of us, we had our desserts. Some of us kept it for later, just in case. So as we arrived into Havana airport, the first thing, there was a sign saying, no food allowed. So all the oranges and apples we had saved, we had to dispose in a basket there. Eventually, we went through the immigration and onto the hotel. We stayed the first night in a hotel Commodore. That was the only nice hotel then. And that was the beginning of our journey, first trip in Cuba. But it was fascinating. We visited several factories there. We visited the original Romeo and Juliet factory, the Partagas factory. And everywhere we went, we were welcomed with such open arms. It was just unbelievable. We were the first group of retailers visiting these factories.
Really?
And
it's hard to believe.
They were told that these are the people who sell these cigars that you make. So, you know, they were so happy to see us, and we were so happy to see them. Mm-hmm. It was fascinating. It was like finding old relatives. You know, the warmth there that was waiting there in the factories.
Did you see El Higuito as well on that trip?
No. El Higuito at that time was out of bounds. It was because El Higuito was the factory where the Davidoff cigars were made. And they had just started making I think the Cohiba Lanceros were made there.
Did it exist? Did Cohiba as a brand exist at that
Yes,
time?
it did exist then. It did exist, but we did not go there. We did the Partagas, the Romeo Juliet factory, and one other factory. I think it was the H. Upman factory we visited.
Sorry to interrupt, Dad. Was this the Partagas that we now visit as a museum or
Yes.
with the shop underneath? Oh, it's a
Exactly,
beautiful,
that's the
beautiful
original
building.
factory. Then it was fully functional, working, beautiful. We had access to everywhere. I mean, any door we wanted to open, we opened, walked in, and everybody, the chavetas, chuck, 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 chuck. That's how they welcomed you.
And the chavetas, by the way, are the blades that all torcedores use, all rollers
The
use.
large, sort of curved knives to use as they're making the cigars.
I must insist that you relight. I can't sit here and
Ah,
watch that.
Use your lighter, which you've kindly lent to me.
So at that time, was there much tourism in Cuba? I mean, was it even very common to?
There was no tourism.
Because
there
this
were a
is-
few Russian tourists.
I mean, at that
And
time,
when
you
I
couldn't
say
even
few,
visit
very
China,
few.
really.
Very few Russian tourists. There was some Germans were there, we noticed.
Were there any Italians? Because Italians always seem to get everywhere.
There might have been, but very, very few. Very few. I mean, we stayed in the Commodore Hotel, and then from there we went and stayed. 2 days later, we stayed in another hotel in the middle of nowhere. This is visiting Pinar del Rio, where the plantations was, which was fascinating again. You know, the first time I was seeing the tobacco plants, the leaves. I mean, you could touch them, you could smell them. We visited the barns where they were storing them. It is just incredible. And from that trip, we came back. We stayed 2 nights in that other hotel next to the
Nacional or-
No.
Inglaterra?
No, Riviera, Hotel Riviera. Hotel Riviera, they had opened it only for us to stay there a few nights. There was no other people there. And you walked into there, you could almost sense the mafia talking to you and around you.
Because that's in The Godfather too,
That
isn't
is
it? If
in The
you've seen The
Godfather
Godfather too, there's a
Yeah, yeah.
scene where Al Pacino ends up in Havana just before the fall of Batista.
Okay.
And one of the mafia businesses was the Riviera Hotel. And the guy was sort of divvying out, and you'll get this hotel, you'll get that
It was
hotel.
just built then. It was just built. I remember so well. I had a lovely room. It was like a suite, huge, with a big piece of carpet there, half of it worn out, a big chandelier, and when I switched the light on, only one bulb came on. There must have been like 80, 90 bulbs, only one of them worked. And in the bathroom, when you opened the water, there were 3 taps: a drinking water tap, which had no water, and then there was the hot water and the cold water. And the cold water was working, and that's all. So, but they only had opened it for a few days just to welcome this group of retailers from the United Kingdom.
It just sat empty and.
And we stayed there 2 nights, and from there we had a week to rest. We went to Varadero, and we stayed in the Nacional Hotel, or Hotel Nacional, which is next to the DuPont house.
Mm-hmm.
The DuPont house belonged to the DuPont family, and during the revolution that was all confiscated. Everything was closed, locked, and done. One of the evenings they invited us to have drinks and smoke a cigar or do a tasting of a cigar in the DuPont house.
Wow.
And we walked into the DuPont house. You could see before us, only 2 hours before, somebody had come to open the doors. Everything was left laying around as it was. Newspapers from the 1959
59
dates on it, magazines, Time magazine. Everything was there. You could actually sit there,
Family
clean the
photographs.
dust, and touch it. It was beautiful. It was lovely. It had a lovely terrace looking onto the ocean, which we realized it's full of mosquitoes, but it was too late. And we did have a wonderful time. The
Wow.
water was beautiful, warm, Caribbean beach. And after 5 or 6 days, we flew back, Aeroflot again. That was my first trip to Cuba. I have such lovely memories. Every factory we visited, we were presented with gifts. Everybody would, like in the Romeo and Juliet, I should have the box.
How many cigars did you bring back with you? How many boxes?
Well, we came back with a lot of cigars purely because every factory we visited, we were presented with a box of cigar, each person. And they wanted to give us other souvenirs, which obviously they didn't. So the only other souvenirs they could give us were cigar bands and sort of papers that covered the cigars, things like that.
Yeah.
Lovely little mementos. So we probably had 4 or 5 boxes each of those cigars. There were not shops as such. There was a few shops we visited, and we bought a few cigars here and there. And then at the last day before coming back, we were presented with a lovely, we visited the head of the offices of the Cuba Tobacco, which is on Calais Riley, or
O'Reilly.
O'Reilly Avenue there. And we met the head of a Cuba Tobacco. I don't remember who it was. It wasn't Padron, it was before him. Olmedo was with us all the trip.
Was it Avelino Lara, or was that different?
No, I didn't meet Avelino Lara there. Avelino Lara, he was the head of the Laguito factory on the production side. And he was, when we opened the
Producing
shop...
Davidoffs.
Yes, producing only Davidoffs. And in 1980, when I opened the shop, Avelino Lara and Rima Fernandez, who was the actual roller, they visited the shop and they stayed here with us for 2 weeks doing the demonstration. That's when I got to meet Avelino Lara. He's another legend. He's not with us any longer. He passed away a few years ago. But we did not visit. I wanted to meet him, but he was based in the Laguito factory and we were not... It was not in our schedule to visit the Laguito factory, so we didn't see him there.
We have photographs in black and white of those early first few days in the shop with Avelino Lara and Norma Fernandez.
Yes.
Rolling, she was rolling here, and there's pictures of my father and Norma and Senor Lara in the cigar room.
He's offering me the cigar, he's sort of lighting a cigar.
This room right here.
This very room.
Avelino Lara, in his later years of his life, he ended up working in Bahamas for a hotel called Greycliff. It's very well known. Greycliff Hotel there is, it's quite well known. It's got the world's largest stock of wines and drinks in his basement. The building belonged to the previous, I think he was the governor there, so he had bought it from the governor. And the basement, when you go into the vaults of where he kept the wine, it extended to underneath the street, underneath the other buildings around there. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of bottles of wine exists there, but it's just incredible. Many years later, I visited there, and Avelino was there as well.
Was he really?
So I met him over
For a
there
second
again.
time. It's hard for me to even fathom, what that era was like. I mean, to hear you describe it, and I'm sure contrasting that with what it's like to go visit Cuba now, or your first time to go visit Cuba.
Oh, yes.
It was, I'm sure, it felt like you were stepping back much farther in time than just the 1980s.
Well, also, it was pre the downfall of the Soviet Empire, or Soviet Union, I should say. So it really had that Soviet, very, very slightly brutalist, revolutionary feel to it. I can imagine. I mean, when I went in '97, it was like that.
We were warned that whatever we say will be listened to, so we were very careful.
Like the internet today.
Like that, yeah, exactly.
Indeed. Except now you don't need to be in Russia for that to be the case. Wow. Well, so you poured something for us, and I'd love for you to talk about what you're smoking. Your father had an opportunity to introduce his cigar. Thank you for sharing that.
It is a pleasure. Thank you. You brought back a lot of memories for me.
We'll touch back at that here in a second, but we'll use this as a segue. Eddie, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I couldn't resist. I'm smoking the new Winston Churchill limited edition 2022 Perfector, which is a 61 ring gauge at its widest point. It's a gorgeous limited edition, just landed. I mean, we're talking a few days here in London.
Wow.
And because of the Winston Churchill, of course, association there, I thought about what can I offer Kirby to enjoy. We've had some wonderful whiskey together. One of our favorite drinks, and being patriotic Armenians,
yes,
it resonates very well with us, is an Armenian brandy.
Okay.
The Armenians call it Cognac, as in cognac, but technically it's a brandy, called Ararat. And it's named after the very infamous mountain that's not in Armenia itself at the moment, but used to be. And Armenians are rightly very proud of the distillery and the product. This particular expression is a 20-year-old called Nairi, and it resonates with Winston Churchill because there's a story to when Winston was first introduced to this very brandy by Stalin, I believe. Is that right?
Absolutely. It was in Yalta. It was in the meeting in Yalta where they had a meeting there, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. After the meeting, they had their dinner, and after the dinner, Roosevelt retired early, but Churchill and Stalin carried on to smoke a cigar. Stalin was smoking his pipe, and Stalin offered Winston Churchill, he said, "Would you like to drink some cognac?" He said, "Oh, I love cognac." And he poured the cognac. As they started drinking, Sir Winston said, "This is delicious. What is this?" He said, "This is Armenian cognac."
Really?
And they specially make it for me as well, this particular bottle, because this is 20 years old. Lovely cognac.
Was it this one or the Dvin that he was... The story goes maybe the Dvin.
Well, I've been told both stories, the Dvin, but the gentleman who we recently got this bottle from, he insisted that it was the Nairi. But I think even if it was the Dvin, it was a 20-year-old one as well. So Sir Winston, he enjoyed that so much that he asked Stalin, he said, "Can I have some more?" He said, "I will send it to you, of course." The meeting finished, they went back to their countries, and very soon, one day, the Prime Minister's office receives a letter from Customs and Excise, and there's a case of spirit here for you, and sir, there is a 20-something pound duty. So can you please arrange payment of that so we could deliver that?
Well,
the payment was made, and Churchill received his cognac. He drank it, he loved it, and he sent a letter to Stalin thanking him for sending the case of the cognac. And he said, "May I just suggest that next time, should you want to send any more, can you please send it through our diplomatic channels?"
To avoid the duty charge.
Which opened the door for the ambassador, the Russian ambassador, to come and visit Sir Winston Churchill every month and to present him the case of Armenian brandy that was sent to him by Stalin.
Well, it's amazing how cigars and great brandy, had been at the center of diplomacy for so long. So, to a great diplomat.
And on that note, may
Sir
I say
Winston
cheers.
Churchill.
Sir Winston
Cheers.
To a fellow statesman. Kirby, to your great health.
Thank you.
Great health.
Edward. And as I drink this, I can see Sir Winston in the bottom of my glass,
He is
smoking
indeed.
his signature
Yes.
cigar.
There he is. These are the special glasses which Davidoff has produced, so you could rest your cigar on it as well.
What more in life does one need?
Perhaps a coffee cup with the same indentation.
That's right.
The reason we love this Armenian brandy, apart from it being an Armenian connection, of course, is that it's reminiscent or reminds us much more of a elegant rum. There's a sweetness and caramel notes to it that you don't always find in brandies. And we think it pairs beautifully with cigars. I hope you enjoyed as much as we do.
Thank you for sharing. I think you two are always exceptionally generous in your hospitality. And what I love about Davidoff of London here, this shop, is how really everyone that walks through the doors has the opportunity to really experience that genuine hospitality that, of course, you two are so famous for. So thank you.
Thank you, Kirby. It's always a pleasure to see you. It's always a pleasure to be able to sit down with somebody who appreciates a cigar, have a chat, share an ashtray together.
I mean, it is, I think, what I love so much about a cigar, and we, of course, speak about this at length, is how, a good cigar really is a commitment to time. And in smoking a cigar, one gets to choose with whom he spends time. And it's an important aspect of enjoying a good cigar is with whom one spends that time with.
Yes.
And here we are, one of my favorite places, of course, in London, here on this corner of St. James's and Jermyn Street at Davidoff of London. And, this it really is one of the first places I visited whenever I first came to London.
Thank you so much, Kirby. I have to say there's another place I would like to spend some time with a cigar with you, and I hope it'll happen soon, is Cuba or Dominican Republic, or both perhaps?
Yeah. Well, how is your cigar developing? This is beautiful.
Well, I hope as well as yours. I love this cigar, so it's the second time I'm smoking it. I'm in love with it. I've put away several boxes already. I'm nervous running out of that. And I have to say, the one you're smoking would have been the one I would have smoked otherwise. How are you finding it?
You're smoking it too fast, Eddie.
Well, it's because, what can I do? I'm blowing smoke
That's a
rings.
62 ring gauge cigar.
Only part of it.
That's right.
You're smoking it too fast.
Well, I suffer from that same proclivity. That's one of the reasons that whenever I first started smoking, would primarily be at night, and I really find myself gravitating towards the double Coronas and the Churchills and the Lusitanas, these large format cigars. But as I've recently installed this absolutely brilliant smoke filtration system in my office, I now find myself having to build up my collection or reserve of Robustos and Coronas because I haven't the time for a proper long cigar during the day.
Yes. We have to find the cigar to match the time we have to offer it now.
So it's been a great kind of privilege because it's given me the opportunity to diversify a little bit my humidor, whereas before it was predominantly larger format cigars. Now being able to kind of experiment. And,
so is it humidor or humidors?
Well, right now, unfortunately, it's just a humidor. But this last trip to London has inspired me to begin working on actually the construction of a walk-in humidor. Oh. So, my small little humidor, which to call it small probably would be a misstatement, but my credenza humidor that I have in the office has become like a game of Tetris. Getting the boxes in and out. So I figured
you're
it's
not
time
the
to
only one. So many of my customers are doing that now. I
the
hear
walk-in humidors.
Walk-in humidors. I mean, walk-in. It could be a small cupboard converted into a humidor, or it could be a spare room that's converted into a humidor. But more and more people, they're asking us advice. How should we do the humidification, extraction, whatever? But I hear it every day.
Well, a video shall be coming to you soon on the construction of this humidor. And
well, we will look forward to coming and inspecting it in person.
Yeah.
Well, first we must fill it. It's like that's the.
God willing, with all the restrictions being lifted, we will be able to personally come and visit and give our advice on the premises itself.
What a brilliant letter. Well, Eddie, what about your first time to Cuba?
So, Dad, you went in '87. I was incredibly fortunate. 10 years later, at that time I had been working here in the shop for about 3-4 years, and it was a very different time for cigars. I think between '87 and '97 we had the cigar boom in the US, driven by cigar aficionado and everyone's interest in smoking. So I went at what I would call peak cigar celebrity moment.
Really?
And Cuba was buzzing. And it was my first trip. I'd fallen completely head over heels in love with cigars. And of course, the idea of going to Cuba.
Were you in the business at that time?
I was, yes. It was about 3 years I was working, 3 or 4 years I was working in the shop already.
It was meant to be a punishment. I said, Eddie, would you come to Cuba with me? And it was supposed to be a punishment for him. And of course, he said he'd love to, and it turned out to be a pleasure, pure pleasure.
It was everything. I mean, perhaps not as sparse and Spartan as my father experienced in '87. There was certainly fewer trappings. It was not a luxury trip as such, but you don't expect that when you go to Cuba. And if you went with the right mindset, which I hope I had, everything was a marvel. From the greeting, from the, you know, even the fact that nothing worked the way we were used to it working was charming. And of course, the cherry on the cake above everything else, you know, coming from London was the climate, but the cigars.
The cigars.
And to see the plantations and to see the real plant itself, the leaves, how they process it, the factories, the rolling.
That was a lovely trip we did, yes.
And I was in the company of cigar royalty. You know, I was a little flea on the backside of these big personalities in the
Gemma's
cigar
father
industry.
was there, Nick Freeman, Gemma's mom, Briggy, and also at one of at the reception, we went to the what's that nightclub where the
Cafe Cantante? Tropicana.
Tropicana, where they didn't have the cigar festivals as such then, but they were having these gatherings in Tropicana, and Fidel Castro came there. I think.
Is this the one where you tell the story of? No, that was a Havanos festival where you tell the story of he wasn't supposed to arrive, but then
that's the one.
This one.
Yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't Havanos. Then even Habanos did not exist as such. This was just, he purely visited there. He did the auction, and of course Eddie was there.
It was amazing.
How many people do you think were there in total?
2,000, I think.
Oh wow!
But not in the Tropicana.
Yeah.
Was it 2,000? It didn't feel that
Well, that's
many.
what they said.
Yeah.
It was packed.
But what a difference
Packed.
10 years made, you know, between your trip, you know, in '87 and your trip in '97.
Yes, and I can, you know, the extra layer there was that they were celebrating the 30th anniversary of Cohiba at that time. It fell in '97 because it was February '97, but technically it was '96, the 30th anniversary. And they had prepared some extraordinary cigars, one of which, and I still remember, we were at the Tropicana and Castro got up and spoke, and I was spellbound by this, I mean, incredibly charismatic person, charming, funny, all of it. And then they had this charity auction of these wonderful humidors, and suddenly my father starts to bid on one of the humidors. And of course I could hear the price.
Yes.
And I was looking at Dad and I was like, oh God, didn't realize he was doing that well in the shop.
Every time my hand went up, Dad.
And next thing I know, Dad had won this amazing humidor. So it was, you know, it had everything for me, that trip. And I have to say, I walked away amongst all of it, remembering that the Cuban people themselves were the magic of that country.
Yeah.
Everyone we met, you know, they from the taxi driver to the porter to the roller to the random person in the street, you know, each one of them had a story to tell. Each one of them was welcoming, you know, cultured,
Yes.
musical.
You forgot the barman.
The barman.
And the guests at the bars.
Yeah. You know, and to this day, if you go to Cuba with the right mindset, which is not to expect a luxury holiday in the sense that we have become accustomed, but if you go there expecting something totally different, and the cradle of the cigar world to be there, you will not be disappointed. I hope that happens soon for you.
All the bucket list pinnacle moments I could ever imagine, you know, having the privilege of visiting Cuba in your company and sharing a cigar in Cuba must be something we try to put on the calendar for this year, you know, if not this year, next, sometime in the near future, even if it means I've got to paddle a boat across the Caribbean, you know, I'll be there.
We will meet you halfway.
On the terrace of the Nacional Hotel there, drinking a mojito.
I mean, I must imagine that smoking a cigar in Cuba just has to be something experience in and of its own.
It tastes, any cigar, the same cigar you smoke here will taste different there. And the cigar that you will taste there will taste different here. It's incredible.
I just love the idea of being able to, bring a box of cigars, acquired in Cuba back, and what a special place that would, occupy in my humidor.
In your new walk-in humidor.
In my new walk-in humidor. Life's too short not to have a walk-in humidor, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think several. My wife aspires to a walk-in cupboard. We aspire to walk-in humidors. I think that's only fair.
I don't think my wife quite understands, but it's probably something that makes her nervous more than anything else. Because, as things go, if it's empty, it must be filled. So your trip, 1997, and I mean, what a difference, 10 years makes.
Oh yes, and again, I didn't go again from '97. I didn't travel there again until 2009.
Really?
There was a big hiatus for me, and what I discovered in 2009, it was a revolutionary change. I mean,
really?
Tourism had been taken to a much higher level, and there used to be, and it was a truism to some degree that dining, and especially drinking, but dining was especially risky in Cuba unless you knew where you were going and you knew what you were eating. By 2009,
like that much of Latin America.
well, there was no problem. By 2009, really? I can genuinely say I've never had a problem. I've been guided in the right directions to the right places, but certainly in the last few years, as a tourist, you can eat very well, you can stay very well, and you will appreciate this. I appreciated it going from the UK. There is an absolute lack of marketing. Sort of capitalism in its rawest sense, which is the expression of trying to persuade people to spend their money, doesn't exist in Cuba.
Yeah.
At least not that we notice. There's no TV, there's no advertising, there's no billboards, or if there are, they're very old.
They're not watching our videos?
Well, they might be.
Political billboards, but that's all.
And you really realize how you're bombarded every minute of your normal life in London or perhaps in the States.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful. It's so refreshing.
It's one of the things I think I admire most about, from a distance, of course, just life in Cuba is how it really has been preserved and being, just exceptionally human, right? I mean, there's none of this, capitalist pressures to, push people towards, onto the, I guess, the rat wheel, if you will. It's an enjoyment of time and of human expression, of art, culture, of dance. And, Cuba, regardless of what you think of the government itself, the people, from what I hear, are exceptionally beautiful people, exceptionally kind and hospitable, and all just kind of full of, of life.
Yes, very, very well said. What is your Spanish like, Kirby?
Well, my wife is Mexican, and my children are, at least my oldest is fluent in Spanish. I joke that, at the age of 4, he stopped speaking to me in Spanish because he quickly realized the limitations of my Spanish, but I'm able to small talk in Spanish quite well.
That is wonderful, because my Spanish is non-existent, and my biggest regret every time I've gone to Cuba is not being able to carry a conversation with someone who may not be great with English.
Yeah.
And if you can, and you open up a whole new seam of joy and depth and understanding of the culture. Next time I go, I will be very pidgin Spanish, but I'll be some Spanish.
Yeah. Could I trouble you for another drop? This is really an exceptional.
Absolutely.
Great pleasure.
Amazing. So, how many times do you think you've had the privilege of visiting, Edward?
God, I lost track of it and count of it.
I mean, between 1987 and 1997, whenever you went with Eddie, how many times do you think you'd been? Too kind.
In 97.
Hopefully there's more where this came from. I feel terrible.
There's plenty
Is
more.
it cases?
The second trip, I think it was in 1992. It was in 1992, and if I'm not mistaken, that was the year when they launched the Cohiba Siglo series.
Yeah.
The Siglo 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5s.
I think Nick was on that trip with you, no?
Nick was... I'm not sure.
No, it wouldn't have. Oh, I'm sorry. The second time you went was
The
92.
second time was 92, yes.
I think Nick would have. When was the first time Nick came with you?
We went there with Nick. It was after 97, maybe 2000, 2000, 2001, 2002.
Yeah. So what was it like? I mean, so, you know, the split with Davidoff, you know, I mean, it was kind of a forced split
It was.
in many ways.
I asked that question from Zeno himself. I asked Zeno about that, and he said that, Edward, it was a happy marriage, but it had to come to an end.
Yeah.
And that was his words.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I imagine at the time must have been quite difficult, but in retrospect really paved the way for, you know, Davidoff to develop into the brand that it is today, because it never could have done that in
Davidoff
Cuba.
would never ever had the opportunity to control its product from the seed all the way to the shop here, had they stayed in Cuba. By going to the Dominican Republic, it enabled them to have their own plantations, their own manufacturing, their own production, their own boxing, their own distribution. I mean, any box of Davidoff cigars here, if you look at the back, there are some numbers on the label. And with those numbers on the label, you could trace that box back to who made the cigars,
Really?
where the tobacco came from, and when it was planted, at what time, what season, by whom. All the information is there. I remember visiting Hankey's office in one of my trips in Dominican Republic, and I said, Hankey, these numbers, what are they? He said, oh, this is, you could trace it. I said, come on now, what do you, he said, come Edward, I'll show you. He had a chart on the wall from this end to that end. And it was all the numbers and the charts and everything. He said, every box, you give me any number, I'll tell you where it came from.
Yeah.
To that extent. And that you will not get any other place unless it's all under your own control. And looking back 20, 21, 22 years later, it proved to be right. They did a long journey in the shortest time possible.
What, 20, 30 something? 30 plus years now?
30, sorry.
Yeah.
And that's why I never really got good marks in mathematics.
Well, I'm employing one of the tricks that you taught me the last time we were smoking here in this room, in these chairs, of rotating my cigar to
Bravo, you
get the even.
remembered.
I'm
Well done.
not quite to your level yet. Your
Well
ability
done,
to,
Kirby.
you know, smoke a cigar perfectly. I can't imagine someone doing it more perfect than your father.
Yes, because the ventilation we have, the airflow, we're sitting in a draft, and every cigar smoker, wherever they smoke their cigar, there will be a draft. Either it will be coming from a window or a door going up from the fireplace or through extractor or an open window. You will always get that flow in the room.
Yeah.
And it's very important to make sure that as you're smoking, gradually rotate it from every puff to puff, if you can rotate it slightly, so it will burn equally
Yeah.
and in a round
I need
circle.
a little bit of help. I'm now becoming self-conscious in my company.
Please do that. That shows that you're paying correct attention to the cigar. Every
And
cigar
you're enjoying the
deserves it.
conversation with us.
So I must say, I mean, for those watching, you know, this was during lockdown, filmed a video where you were exceptionally generous in bringing in some of these reserve humidors. And this one that you spoke about in 2007, buying an auction, or 97,
In 97.
the Tropicana, you know, you opened up for us all to see. You know, I hope one day that those end up, I mean, really in a Davidoff of London or a Sahakian museum somewhere.
Well,
With all these photographs that you're referencing. I mean, again, one of the things that I'm just so struck here is just how much of this modern history of just Cuban tobacco and tobacco in general, you know, you've had the privilege of really witnessing. and living through, both of you.
It was a great privilege for me, an honor. And looking back, it's 42 years now that I'm in these chairs, smoking and still enjoying.
Yeah.
All it does is just adds more and more wonderful memories.
Yeah, it really is.
And I hope Eddie will say the same another 20, 30, 40, 50 years later as well.
And truly the people we meet along this journey are the highlights. And Kirby, I include you in very high on that list.
I'm humbled.
Genuinely, our friendship came from this wonderful shop and your love of cigars. And now I hold you as a very dear friend.
Yeah.
And I look forward to your visits. I hope to reciprocate on one occasion at least.
We've got to get you two gentlemen there to Texas one day.
I can't wait.
I'm working on building, the smoking room and the humidor so that I may properly welcome,
Or
you
maybe
to
a
Texas.
cigar evening
Yes.
with some other cigar lovers, friends. That will be wonderful.
Yeah.
It will give us a stronger excuse to come and visit you.
I think we need a world tour of the Sahakians. We've got to do a smoking event in New York, in Dallas, and maybe somewhere on the West Coast.
Come on, Kirby. I think between you and your fans, your viewers, I think there would be great appetite to host something perhaps in Texas first, home soil. If you do such a thing, I promise you, short of them tying us to the chairs and not letting us travel, we would be honored to be there.
We've got to begin working on that then, because it would be such a privilege to welcome you, to my home.
Texan steak
Yes.
and ribs.
Well, I must say I've had the privilege of traveling quite extensively. I mean, not as extensively as you two gentlemen, of course, being as young as I am, but I must say that I'm always a little reticent to order steak outside of Texas, because it truly is just better there. That's one of the few things I think we may lay claim to. Probably debatable to those watching.
We will come and do a tasting of steak there.
Well, there's plenty of
cigars.
steakhouses.
Steak and cigars.
So whenever you travel to Cuba today, right, does it still kind of hold that same romance and mystique as it did whenever you first started visiting?
It does for me. Every trip I look forward to it. When I arrive there, I'm happy. When I leave there, I'm happy. I'm coming back home. But I always come back with some lovely memories. And to get there now, it's much easier.
Yes.
We have the benefit
Direct flights now, right?
Direct from London, we get the Virgin flight direct. Before it was British Airways, but they stopped doing that. I still like going through Madrid with Iberia.
Yeah.
Gives me a chance to stretch my legs in Madrid for a couple of hours before I fly to Cuba.
Well, you've even had the privilege once of flying on a mutual friend's Gulfstream or something.
Twice in a private jet, yes. Well, that was out of this world. That was something
I think I would fly.
Never forget.
I would fly all the way to London for that privilege of going via jet.
The most interesting part was that the pilot, it was his first time he was landing in Havana. And I said, do you know where to land? He said, I don't know, but I'm following this.
I'm sure, what an experience for him. Wow, well, gentlemen, thank you so much. And what a dream to one day be able to visit Cuba in your great company. Maybe we'll be able to rope Gemma into this also. And I think that is certainly something we must begin working on, one day, hopefully in the near future, of being able to realize that in your great company, and to enjoy this great moment of smoking a cigar with each other, maybe drinking some nice Cuban rum in Havana, smoking cigars from Havana with you all. So
definitely, it's a dream we have to fulfill.
Yes, we
to
must
your
do
good
that.
health.
Yeah.
Yes,
thank
gentlemen.
you.
To our dreams and our friendships.
Yes, let's drink that. It's been captured on camera, so it must happen now.
And you introduced that.